Welcome back to the Backyard Professor videos. I'm just getting out of church, and I actually was able to teach the scouts today about Alma 32. Very interesting. I just mentioned Alma 32 to a Book of Mormon reader as what I consider to be one of the more profound parts of the Book of Mormon. And someone has requested that I discuss 2 Nephi chapter 4, and especially verse 34. And verse 34 in 2 Nephi 4 says, O Lord, I have trusted in thee, and I will trust in thee forever. I will not put my trust in the arm of flesh, for I know that cursed is he that putteth his trust in the arm of flesh. Yea, cursed is he that putteth his trust in man, or maketh flesh his arm. Very profound teaching. Actually, the entire chapter 4... there's the telephone. I bet that's for me. Hang on, I'll be right back. Don't go away. Yep, it was the telephone. I'm back. Anyway, what was I lying about? Oh, yeah, chapter 4. This particular chapter comes in the middle of a very impressive situation that the Nephites found themselves in. What I want to do is I'm just going to pick and choose bits and pieces of chapter 4 and just basically ad-lib as I can. I know there's other commentators who've done a much more thorough job than I'm going to do, but I want to give you my basic impressions, ideas. As something comes to my mind, I'll share it with you, and let's see if we can come to an understanding, maybe possibly a greater appreciation of what Nephi is teaching. The very interesting part about this chapter, the first part, say through the first... this is where Lehi gathers together. Nephi is kind of summing up his father's life, and he talked about a lot of the prophecies of Joseph of Egypt. And he says that my father was on his deathbed, and he gathered all the family together. And this was Lehi's last will and testament. Now, this fits into the genre of testamentary literature really well. We have the testaments of the 12 patriarchs in the old world, and we have the testament of Abraham. You have testaments of Adam. You have testament of Gad and Reuben and Naphtali, and the testament of Joseph. And this testamentary literature, where the old man, the patriarch, gathers his family together and gives them blessings and prophesies to them about their future. I mean, this is the famous blessing of Moses that he gave in Genesis, where we read about Joseph being a fruitful bough, a bough that even runs over the ocean, and so on and so forth. The branches run over the wall, and we interpret that wall to mean the ocean, we Latter-day Saints. And the Book of Mormon, we contend, is a record of those descendants of Joseph who came over that wall of the ocean. Now, that's the LDS interpretation, but this testamentary literature is not lost sight of in Nephi's record keeping. Now, this is how typical ancient patriarchs behaved, and Lehi fits the mold beautifully. We see that through, all the way through verse 11. After he made an end of speaking unto the various members of his family, Nephi and Sam and Laman and Lemuel and their wives and their children and Lehi's grandchildren and so on and so forth. He says he wanted them to inherit the land, and he wanted their seeds to be numbered among his righteous seed, and so on and so forth. And after he gathered his household and spoke the feelings of his heart, the feelings of a tender parent, the Spirit of the Lord was in him. He waxed old, he died, and he was buried. That's verse 12. This testamentary literature idea, beautifully portrayed here. And it came to pass that not many days after his death. Now here we go again. See, this same cycle keeps occurring with Laman and Lemuel. Not many days after his death, Laman, Lemuel, and the sons of Ishmael were angry with me, Nephi, because of the admonitions of the Lord. It's just the same old stuff. Nephi is so righteous that Laman and Lemuel and now some of the sons of Ishmael and daughters of Ishmael just can't stand him. And he's constrained to speak of them, and he speaks to them of many things which are written upon the other plates, and he describes the various different sets of plates, which is kind of interesting. And he says, upon these plates, I want to write the spiritual ministry that I had, my heart pondering the scriptures, and what was engraved upon the plates of brass. That's verse 15. Then in verse 16 he says, my soul delights in the things of the Lord. And we see that through his constant interaction, not only with his own parents, Lehi and Sariah, but also with his brothers and sisters, and their wives and husbands and families. But then he gets brutally honest. Now this ties in really well with Alma 32. He gets brutally honest with himself. In verse 17 he says, "Notwithstanding the greatness of the Lord being shown unto me, he said, I was a wretched man. He said, my heart sorrowed because of my flesh, and my soul grieveth because of the iniquities of my actions, my heart, my mind." He said, "I'm compassed about by temptation and sin." He's complaining because he's human. I mean, this is his lot in life, but you can really see his efforts to say, yeah, I know I'm human, but I wanted to overcome this. He had his magnificent vision of the tree of life, the same vision, incidentally, that his father Lehi had. He also had. He had seen how the boats of mankind were made, and he built his boat according to the revelations that he got from God. He didn't build it after the manner of man, so on and so forth. He constantly says, and this is why he says, I constantly tried to seek the Lord, but my flesh is weak. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Nephi unpacks that concept here for 35 verses. He unpacks this idea that the spirit is willing, and his spirit, of course, is willing, but the flesh is weak, and his flesh, he says, was weak. Well, if Nephi was weak, none of the rest of us have a chance, do we? Talk about eating humble pie, reading about his astonishing greatness, and yet he comes along and he says, I grieve because of mine iniquities. Holy cow. And when I desire to rejoice, my heart groans because of my sins. Nevertheless, I know in whom I have trusted. See, his personal knowledge. He knows where he goes. He goes to the Lord, right? And he says, my God has been my support. He's led me through my afflictions and preserved me upon the waters of the great deep. He's filled me with his love unto the consuming of my flesh. He's confounded my enemies, so on and so forth. He's heard my cry by day. He's given me the knowledge by visions in the nighttime. And by day I wax bold and mighty prayer before him. And he says, the wings of my spirit, or the wings of his spirit, has carried my body away into exceeding high mountains. My eyes have seen things that are even too great for man. Therefore I am bidden that I should not write them. Now that's a sobering thought. He has astonishing visions and information and knowledge, and he's not even allowed to write them down. He has to keep them to himself. We don't have any of that. How many of the prophets have had those experiences? How many of them have tried to explain it, but simply couldn't? Paul, you think of Paul in the New Testament immediately. You think of Isaiah. You think of Jeremiah and his counsel of the gods. Well, you think of Lehi's vision and his counsel of the gods in the very first chapter, the first and second chapters of 1 Nephi, where he saw the numerous concourses of angels circling the throne of God and so on and so forth. Well, they couldn't write about all their experiences. And this brings us to the context, I would propose, how I understand this context. He says he's really angry because of his enemies and his slackening of faith and so on and so forth. But he said, I turn to the Lord, I rejoice in my God, the rock of my salvation, so on and so forth. Now verse 32. Very interesting. May the gates of hell be shut continually before me, because that my heart is broken and my spirit is contrite. O Lord, wilt thou not shut the gates of thy righteousness before me, that I may walk in the path of the low valley, that I may be strict in the plain road. O Lord, verse 33, O Lord, wilt thou encircle me around in the robe of thy righteousness? Wilt thou make a way for my escape before my enemies? The circling of the robe in righteousness. This is atonement language. This is the becoming at one with the Lord. In the desert, Nibley showed the Arabian desert chieftains, the sheiks, the tribal chieftains, when they met strangers and they covenanted with each other the chieftain would protect the stranger and the stranger would serve the chieftain. He would take his robe and he would encircle it around the person and he would say, okay, now this is my willingness to show you symbolically that I'm willing to take you under my wing and protect you. this is what Nephi is praying for the Lord to do. It's atonement language. It's very interesting.